Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel, and in today's video, I am going to be tier ranking every single fantasy romance book that I have read this year using Taylor Swift songs. So I am so excited for today's video. I'm also a little bit nervous. I've never done like the tier ranking video style thing, and it's a little more involved. It is a little bit more complicated, so I apologize if there are any technical issues. Hopefully not. But regardless, I am so excited to do today's video. I am certainly not the first person to do tier ranking books. These are actually some of my favorite videos to watch, and I wanted to take a crack at it this year. As I have been kind of preparing my end of year content and reviewing the books that I've read this year, I decided that I wanted to tier rank every fantasy romance book that I have read. It is my favorite subgenre. It is what I focus on a lot on my channel, and I thought that it would be fun to go over those books with you. I also wanted to incorporate one of my other major passions in life other than fantasy romance is Taylor Swift. So I will be using Taylor's songs as my tiers, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But basically, I'm going to be going through, I think, the 37 new fantasy romances that I read this year and tier rank them. So the way that I'm going to be ranking them is more so, how does that book hit me now? How was the reading experience? How do I look at it in general, overall, from when I first read it? So I'm not necessarily going to be putting like all of my 4-star books into the 4th tier, all of my 3-star books into the 3rd tier, because like there's not a lot of suspense or theater in that. I thought it would be more fun if I just kind of look at how I feel about the book now, how my feelings changed, and in general, where do I think that that book belongs? What category does it belong in? So that's not to say though that I'm sure a lot of my 5-star books will end up in the top tier and my 1-star books may end up in the bottom tier. But overall, I'm really excited to do this video. Without further ado, let's get started. Let me explain my Taylor Swift themed tier ranking system for these fantasy romance books. All right, so here we have my Taylor Swift themed tier ranking system. So I picked out 5 of Taylor's songs that I feel like could depict the 5 tiers that I commonly see on these tier ranking videos. So they are all just song titles. Some of the song titles are pretty self-explanatory for how I feel about this book, and then others are going to be more specific to the meaning of the song or the lyrics or just kind of the general vibe. So our very first tier, our very first top tier, god tier, these are my favorite books, the best of the best, the creme de la creme, and that is going to be Invisible String, which was on Taylor's album Folklore. So the reason why I decided to make the top tier Invisible String is because Invisible String is all about feeling like you have been connected to this person for your whole life, that there's always been this golden thread pulling you towards each other, and I feel like it's one of Taylor's most romantic songs and just biggest love proclamations. That is how I feel about top tier, god tier books. Not only do I love them, but I just feel drawn to them. They have bewitched me body and soul, and so they deserve to be at the top because I truly feel that there was an invisible string guiding me to them all along. The next tier is Gorgeous, which is off of Reputation. I feel like this one is pretty self-explanatory, so I don't mean gorgeous with how the book looks necessarily. I just mean overall, this book is gorgeous. This book is one of my faves. I absolutely loved it. It was a gorgeous reading experience. It was a gorgeous time. So I don't love these books quite at the cosmic level that I love the books in the Invisible String category, but Gorgeous is pretty damn good in my book. So the next tier is going to be Mr. Perfectly Fine, which is off of Fearless, Taylor's version. This song is about Taylor's best ex and the best Jonas brother, Joe Jonas. And I feel like this song really does exemplify what a mid-tier book is. These books, they're perfectly fine, okay? I am not going to be shouting their names from the rooftop, but I am not going to be throwing tomatoes at them either. Like, they are just very average reading experiences. I don't feel super strongly either way. They exist, they're there. They are Mr. Perfectly Fine. The second to the bottom tier is going to be This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. I believe this is on Reputation as well, either Reputation or Lover. But to me, this song and this tier is just like the definition of, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. I'm shaking my head. You know, you could have been so great. You should have been so great, but you weren't. And this is why we can't have nice things. You know, I wanted you to be so fantastic. You just did not make the cut. And I have a few problems with these books. So they're not quite at the bottom tier, but they're close. They're very close. And they are the reason that we cannot have nice things. And then the very last tier, the bottom of the barrel, Should Have Said No, which is on Debut. And these are just books that I look at my year, I look at my reading experience with them, and I go, you know what? I should have said no. I just shouldn't have picked these books up. I don't necessarily like regret any of the books that I've read, but I do just feel like I spent so much time reading them, and then for me to walk away feeling very just lackluster, or even just feeling like not positive about these books, they're gonna go in the should have said no category, unfortunately. So this is my Taylor Swift themed tier ranking system. Let's get straight into it. Let's start ranking some books. Okay, so number one, we are starting strong. We have A Lust for Blood by K.C. Smith. I actually just read this book a couple days ago, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I hate to do it, should have said no. This book was just extremely disappointing and very much the definition of telling versus showing. I truly just don't really feel like I have anything positive to say about this book. I thought that there were some really pretty quotes in it, I will say, but overall, it's just one of those books that I'm probably never going to think about again, so it belongs in should have said no. The next book, which is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is one of my favorite books of all time. This book is stunning. This book is better than gorgeous, and I truly believe that this book is just like, it's one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. So it's going in invisible string. I feel such a connection to this book. I would tattoo this entire book on my body if I could. Not really, but if I was feeling a little quirky, I might do it. Next is going to be A Twist of the Blade by S.M. Gaither. So this is the second book in the Shadows and Crowns series, the first book being The Song of the Marked. To be honest with you, I liked A Twist of the Blade. It was a good time, but I don't think she's gorgeous. I really don't. And I don't think that she's This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, but you know, she's just fine. So she is going to Joe Jonas's namesake in Mr. Perfectly Fine. A perfectly fine book. I'm not mad at it. I don't love it, and it hasn't really left me with much of a feeling. The next book is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This is a YA paranormal fantasy romance. This book is so good. This book really blew my mind. I did not expect to love it as much as I ended up loving it, but truly, it was one of my favorite books that I read this year, so it's going in invisible string. I have to say it. I was thinking about putting it in gorgeous, but you know what? I want to give it its due. I want to give it its flowers. It is going in invisible string. I loved it and had such a good time reading it. The next book is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. This is the first book in the Caraval trilogy. It's a YA fantasy romance, circus themed. This is a hard one for me. I don't feel like really negative feelings about Caraval, but I don't really feel like super positive feelings about this book either. It was like good, I guess. You know what? I'm gonna put it in Mr. Perfectly Fine. I'm not gonna be mean. I contemplated putting it in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, but I'm not that mad at it. But it's like a low Mr. Perfectly Fine, I would say. It's close, but it's not quite there. Okay, the next book is City of Gods and Monsters by Kayla Edwards. Hannah, shout out to you. Take a guess where I'm going to be putting this book. This is a Kindle Unlimited adult urban fantasy. It gets compared to Crescent City a lot. One of the most disappointing books I've ever read. I had such high hopes for this book. Hannah and I were so excited to read this. I truly thought that this was going to be on like my best books of the year. Like I was ready to just shout this book's name from the rooftops, be so excited about it, and it just did not live up to the hype that I built in my head. Honestly, it's my fault, but I did see a lot of people speaking positively about this book. It just didn't hit me well, so I'm gonna say this is a should have said no. I gained nothing by reading this book. And it's such a long book too. I think it's almost 800 pages. Unfortunately, that is should have said no. All right, so next we are on to the Daughter of No Worlds trilogy, the War of Lost Hearts trilogy by Carissa Broadbent. You guys know how I feel about these books. I did try to put most of the series together, by the way. I'm looking at it now. I think most of them are, but I apologize if some of them are not. Okay, so the first book, Daughter of No Worlds. I am so in love with this entire series, but particularly the first book was just incredible. It blew me away. I will say the beginning was a little slow. I wasn't quite sure, but by the end, I was so blown away and so in love, and this is the book that made me fall in love with Carissa Broadbent's writing. This is going in invisible string. You guys, I love it. I love Carissa's books, and I'm just so happy. It's truly like the highlight of my year is discovering her books, so that for sure is an invisible string book. Children of Fallen Gods, that is the sequel. I'm going to put this in gorgeous. Oh, this is our first gorgeous book. It's stunning. I love it. It's a wonderful sequel. It just doesn't give me the same feelings that Daughter of No Worlds did. So that's going to be a 4th tier book, but not at all a bad ranking. And then the finale, Mother of Death and Dawn. This is going to be an invisible string book. I loved it so much. I cried so much. This was such an emotional read, but a really good finale. And you know, for a character-driven fantasy romance, it really does not get much better than this. Daughter of the Drowned Empire. Oh, I can't remember the author's name. I think it's Diane Ellis Mills, I want to say. Diane Malice, something like that. I apologize. So this is another Kindle Unlimited fantasy romance. Honestly, God, I don't know. I feel really nothing for this book. Like, I think I gave it 3 stars because I do think that the overall idea of the plot is interesting and I was kept interested somewhat throughout. But God, looking back now, I just don't really feel any strong feelings towards this book. You know what? I'm gonna say This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things just because I haven't put anything in there. I'm not super mad at this book, but like it did disappoint me quite a bit. I'm like a parent looking at my child, daughter of the Drowned Empire, saying, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. That's how I feel about this book. Okay, Divide the Night by Bridget Kemmerer. This is a YA fantasy romance. This one was a bit of a disappointment as well. Divide the Night, it just did not deliver on the romance that I thought it was going to, and it was very, very heavy on the political themes, which is not something that bothers me if the other elements are done well, but I just feel like this was basically a political only fantasy. There wasn't even that much fantasy aspect, to be honest with you. So I'm gonna put this also in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. It's not quite should have said no, but like it's getting there. Okay, so now we have the first 3 books in the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy. I have not read Glow yet because of course I haven't. So I just have Gild, Glint, and Gleam. I do have them out of order here, but Gild is the first book. I will say I was so surprised by this first book. I really, really loved it. I was kind of nervous about it because I had heard so much hype and I really didn't know what to think, but I'm gonna say Gild is gorgeous. Gild was a really, really fun reading experience. I really liked the world. I liked the setup. I was very intrigued by the series at this point. So the first book is gorgeous. The rest of the series may not be so much. I'm gonna do, I think the second book is Glint, right? It's Gild, Glint, Gleam. That sounds right. Okay, so I'm gonna do Glint first. Glint is going to be Mr. Perfectly Fine. I did enjoy this book, but to be honest with you, basically like nothing happened in the second book. It was some character development, which was nice to see. So I don't like hate this book. I don't have super negative feelings about it, but for a fantasy romance, I just don't feel like too much happened. And I'm not like the biggest stickler for like really intense, amazing, intricate plots if the characters are well done, but overall, Glint is just like fine. Then the third book, Gleam, you know what? I'm gonna put her next to her sister in Mr. Perfectly Fine. Another very fine book. It was okay. I don't really have much else to say about it. It was good, but like I don't feel super strong feelings about it. The next book is House of Beating Wings. I actually just read this book as well. So this is another adult fantasy romance. This was another disappointment. I wanted to love this so much. I thought it had a cool setup. I thought it had a cool premise. The writing was just so surface level. The main character was immature. She never questioned anything. Like she's just a regular person and she gets sent on this quest and she doesn't like, she's never stops and says, hey, why me? Never, 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 never. I don't understand. I couldn't get behind the plot. I couldn't get excited about the characters. I'm going to put this in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things because I feel like the books that I'm going to be putting in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, they have some like redeeming qualities. They're not like so far gone. Should have said no's for the so far gone books. The next book, House of Sky and Breath, where do you guys think I'm going to put this? Come on. This is like the sequel of Century, the sequel of my life. She has to go in Invisible String, okay? I loved this book so much. It was such an amazing reading experience. And truly, if I know one thing in this life of sin, it is that Rune Dannon and I have an invisible string connecting us to each other. Next is going to be Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. This is a tough one. This book, I'm so perplexed by this book and this whole series because I want to like it. I feel like I should like it. On paper, I should love this book, and I just don't. I feel so lukewarm about this book. So lukewarm. Ah, God. This one's hard. You know what? I'm gonna say This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. I'm gonna be a little bit ruthless. I was really disappointed by this book, and that's what's motivating me to put it in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things versus Mr. Perfectly Fine, because I just think that this book should have delivered a lot more. I expected it to deliver a lot more than it did. So that is unfortunate, but yeah, that's how I feel. I am just now realizing I did not include Kingdom of the Cursed. That would probably go in Mr. Perfectly Fine, or This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. But I forgot about it, apparently, so maybe it should belong in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. Okay, the next book is Lightlark by Alex Astor. This is a YA fantasy romance. This book had a lot of buzz this year, and a lot of people don't like this book, and I am here to say, this book is gorgeous. I'm sorry. It was fun. It was a really, really fun time. You know, sometimes I connect with a writing style, and I'm like, you know what? Is this the most amazing book I've ever read? Absolutely not. I see the flaws, but it kept me entertained enough and I'm intrigued enough that I'm excited by this book, and I'm going to call it gorgeous, which I know is a very bold statement, but I'm very much looking forward to the second book. This is also being adapted into a movie. I will be in theater seeing it, so that is a gorgeous book for me. Nightshade by Carrie Lake. So this is kind of a dark gothic paranormal romance. I honestly was very, very overwhelmed while reading this book. It had so many plot lines. There was a lot going on and it had a lot of promise. I was excited by it in the beginning, but the more that I read it, the more that I was just like, what is going on? And also, I do remember feeling that this book was way too long. Truly, if it was like 200 pages shorter, I think I would have liked it more. I'm going to say, I'm gonna put it in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. I don't think it's quite at Should Have Said No, because I did like it in the beginning. Oh, okay, now we are at the Folk of the Air series. You guys, I love this series so much. I did contemplate putting this on this tier ranking video, just because, like, is this a fantasy romance series? I don't know. Part of me says yes, part of me says no. But the stronger part of me says, if it's not a fantasy romance, then why did Holly Black write one of the greatest enemies to lovers relationships that I have ever read? I love Jude and Carden, and any chance that I can get to talk about them more, I'm gonna take it. So if you don't think that this is a fantasy romance, I get it, but I definitely do, just because their relationship was chef's kiss. It's perfect. So the first book is The Cruel Prince. When I read this series earlier this year, I was very nervous because I have mostly heard like pretty negative things about this series, but I gotta tell you, The Cruel Prince, that's an invisible string book. When Carden threw Jude into the pond in the beginning of The Cruel Prince, I was like, okay, here we go. This is gonna be a good time. This is going to be extremely morally gray. This is going to be enemies to lovers, like someone finally delivering on true enemies to lovers. So yeah, The Cruel Prince, it was a great time. I loved it so much. Absolutely, invisible string. Then we have the sequel, which is Wicked King. This is my favorite book in the series. So 100% this is an invisible string book. Oh my God, I love The Wicked King so much. Even though the ending is just crazy and makes me mad, I absolutely loved the tension and the development of Jude and Carden's relationship in this book. It's my favorite in the trilogy. And then we have the finale, Queen of Nothing. I do really, really like this book, but I am sad that like it's not my favorite in the series. I think I gave it 4 stars, and I think I gave the other 2 books 5 stars. So I'm gonna give the Queen of Nothing to Gorgeous. She can sit there. I feel like that is correct. A very, very high Gorgeous. I'm gonna put, you know what? I'm gonna move her in front of these two because she's definitely like, I love this book way more than Guild or Lightlark, but they all belong in Gorgeous. So Queen of Nothing, very, very close. It's like a Gorgeous and a half, basically. The next book is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. So this book is a YA fantasy romance. I really, really like the writing style. I thought that it was very whimsical. And when I look back on this book, I think, you know what? That was a very, very fun time. Even though the story doesn't have like too much depth, I had a lot of fun following Evangeline and Jax and seeing their relationship kind of blossom and then like not really blossom and just, you know, kind of be all over the place. Once Upon a Broken Heart, this is a gorgeous book. I had a really, really great time. I am nervous to read the second one, The Ballad of Never After, because I have heard some mixed reviews, but Once Upon a Broken Heart, it was a good time. I had fun. I'm good with it being in the Gorgeous tier. Pestilence by Laura Thalassa. So this is a 4 Horsemen retelling. You know what? God, I think I gave this book like 4 stars. Honestly, there's like nothing wrong with this book, but there's nothing like amazing about this book. It was fun, and that is literally the only thing I have to say about this book. Like I don't feel too excited about it. I guess Pestilence is going in Mr. Perfectly Fine. That seems fair. I don't even know if I'm going to continue on with the series just because I don't really feel called to do so, and that kind of makes me think it should be in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, but I enjoyed it more than the books in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. So it's Mr. Perfectly Fine, but it's right on the edge. Okay, the next book is To Bleed a Crystal Bloom. This is a dark Rapunzel retelling fantasy romance series. Honestly, this book was just like very stale, very one note, not like nothing, really did nothing for me. I also just found some of the storylines to be a bit confusing, and I just was not really into this book. I'm going to put this in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. There might be a redeeming quality or two for this book, but overall just not a memorable time. Speaking speaking of not memorable times, we have The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. This was a disappointing book for me, only because I truly thought that I was going to give this book like 5 stars. It's fine. It's an enemies to lovers. You know, the princess is set to marry this guy from another kingdom for political gain, and she basically trains to be an assassin to kill him, but then they fall in love. I just felt like the romance was pretty lacking. I wasn't excited by this couple. I did not really find the story to be very entertaining. You know what? I hate to say it. It's going in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. Honestly, like, I thought that I would put that in Mr. Perfectly Fine, but the more I talk about it, the more I'm just like, I don't like this book very much. So second to last here. Next is going to be These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan. This is a YA fantasy romance. It's ACOTAR meets The Cruel Prince, kind of. This is a very fun book. It's kind of silly. It's kind of over the top. I had fun reading this book. I really, really liked the audiobook. Honestly, the way that I feel about Lightlark is the way that I feel about These Hollow Vows, but not quite as strongly. So for that, I am going to put These Hollow Vows in Mr. Perfectly Fine. Okay, the next book is Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. This is the first book in the Remnant Chronicles. This is a book that absolutely just blew my mind. I was not expecting to love this book as much as I did. I truly thought that this would be like a very average, cute YA fantasy time, and I honestly fell in love with this book. I almost gave this book 5 stars, but I held off just because my friends Cami and Hannah said the second book is even better. So I'm putting The Kiss of Deception in Gorgeous. It's close to Invisible String though. I'm also gonna move it up a little bit. I know that this ranking probably doesn't matter, but it matters in my head. So Kiss of Deception is a gorgeous book. Okay, so next we have The Serpent and the Wings of Night. You guys already know. You already know what tier this is going in. Taylor Swift wrote The Invisible String about me and The Serpent and the Wings of Night, I am pretty sure. This book is one of my favorite books of the year. It's my favorite KU fantasy romance. It is everything to me. It's a vampire fantasy romance. We have enemies to lovers. We have a stabby female main character. We have beautiful writing. We have everything. So The Serpent and the Wings of Night, top tier book. Next, we have The Song of the Marked by S.M. Gaither. That is the first book in the Shadows and Crowns series. I really, really enjoyed this book. I will say, before I started reading Daughter of No Worlds and The Serpent and the Wings of Night, the Shadow and Crowns series was my favorite KU fantasy romance. Really, really solid. Definitely a good one. I think this will go in Gorgeous though. I did really, really love this book, and I was super shocked by the ending, but it's not quite at the level of Invisible String now that I've read more fantasy romance. Okay, so now we have the Zodiac Academy series. Oh boy. Okay, so we have 7 books here. At first, I was thinking about like lumping this series together and just putting it in one tier, but you know what? I have very strong and different feelings about these books, particularly as more time has gone on. I feel my feelings for each of these books changing and developing in good ways and in bad ways. So we're gonna go with the first book, the Zodiac Academy book 1. I think it's called The Awakening. I know that people like hate the series, and like I get it. I get it if you don't like the series. It is a little cringe. It is a little over the top. It is a little cartoonish at times, but I am putting The Awakening in Gorgeous. It was so much fun. I had such a good time reading this book. It sucked me in so much. I have said since the beginning, this series is like a CW show, like The Vampire Diaries. Is the writing good? Is the acting good? No, but am I gonna have a good time and binge the entire series in like a couple days? Absolutely. So the first book I am saying is Gorgeous. I am also going to say that the second book is gorgeous as well. I had a really good time. We were developing the world more. I enjoyed getting to know the characters, and I was still really, really enjoying the series. The third book, which I believe is called The Reckoning, this is my favorite book in the series. It's not at Invisible String level though, so I'm gonna put it in Gorgeous, but I loved the relationship that developed in this book. Blue means you. I had so much fun reading this. Okay, so now for the rest of the series, this is where we start to take a turn. The fourth book is Shadow Princess. It's a pretty crazy book. I'm gonna put it in Mr. Perfectly Fine. This is where I kind of started to get a little bit exhausted by some of the things happening in this series, and I started to feel that we were being dragged through the mud for being dragged through the mud's sake. This was like the first indication of that when I read this book. Then we have the fifth book, which is Cursed Fates. The ending of this book is a crime, to be honest with you. I cried so hard reading the end of this because truly I was exhausted and frustrated and just like, what the hell? So even though I did enjoy some of the emotional turmoil that I went through with the series, it starts to get exhausting. I'm gonna put the fifth book also at Mr. Perfectly Fine. I think that's a good spot for it. I do like those books 4 and 5, but I did not enjoy them as much as I enjoyed the first 3. Okay, the sixth book, which I don't remember the name of, but it does have the Aquarius symbol on it, which is great for me. This is where I really started to just just feel like I was not having a good time anymore. The sixth book, I mean, it still has like these characters that I love in it. I liked the characters. That's why I felt invested and wanted to continue on with the series. But the plot was just like 3 types of crazy at this point. I am putting the sixth book in This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. When I look back on this book, I don't really look back on it fondly. I don't hate it. It has a couple redeeming qualities, but it's just not as good as the others. So the very last book that I will be tier ranking is the very last book of the Zodiac Academy series. I will say by the time that I read the 7th book, I was at my breaking point with this series. It's just like, it doesn't end. It does not end with this series. It's just over and over again, pain for pain's sake. I also just felt like the motivations of our characters, the plot lines, everything was just, I feel like it's falling apart at this point. I need these authors to wrap this series up in a nice, neatly tied bow, just because I couldn't do it by this point. Once I was at book 7, I was really done. And I honestly do regret kind of binging the series the way that I did. And I do wonder if I had given it a little bit more time, maybe I would like the 7th book. I'm gonna do something here that's pretty harsh. I'm gonna put this in should have said no. I don't necessarily regret reading it, but I just don't really have anything positive to say about this book. I still enjoy the series overall. I am still going to finish the series, but just because of a multitude of factors within the book, and also probably because I binged it, I don't really have anything great to say about it. Like, it's fine. I do recommend the series overall for an adult fantasy bully romance, but like personally, as the series went on, I just started to get too exhausted to care, and I was pretty done with it at that point. Okay, so that is my Taylor Swift themed fantasy romance tier ranking of course, every fantasy romance book that I read this year. I'm happy with this. It's so crazy. I feel like I read so much fantasy romance, but this does not even look like that much. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I am a little surprised with how some of these books turned out, but I will just say, as time passes and as I read more fantasy romance, the way that I look at other fantasy romance books that I read before that does tend to change a little bit, and my tastes do develop. So that is it. That is my completed Taylor Swift themed tier ranking of every fantasy romance that I read this year. All right, guys, so that is going to be it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know, were you surprised by any of my choices? Were you surprised by where some of these books ended up? If you made it to this point in the video and you wanted to let me know, go ahead and leave the fairy emoji. It's my absolute favorite emoji and represents the fantasy romance genre very well. As always, my Instagram and my Goodreads are linked down below. You are welcome to follow me on there at any time. I really appreciate that you watched this video. I hope that you are all having a fantastic day, and I will catch you guys in the next one.